I think all coaches would agree that confidence is a major key for any player's success, but how do you teach it? I mean, some players have it, some players don't, and what can we do as coaches to help our players build confidence in themselves so that they can have great games and we can win games too? All right, everybody, welcome back to the Pass First podcast where we talk about basketball. My name is Augie Johnston. I'm here with my co-host, Alex Engel. We're both high school basketball coaches. Today we're talking about confidence. It's kind of an elusive topic because it's something that we want our players to have. We want our players to play with confidence, but I think something that all of us as players at some point in our playing career struggle with. Alex, what role do you think confidence plays in a player's success overall?
I think a major role. It's hard to say what's the most important thing, but you could make an argument that confidence is it. Because I've seen players that are not super skilled, but they're very confident in what they're doing, and they outperform players who are realistically much more skilled than them, but just don't have that same level of confidence. So I think that confidence is a major key and a major important part of a player, and honestly in any sport. No matter what you're doing, you're going to have a level of confidence in yourself to compete.
I feel like basketball is like a game of mistakes, kind of, and it's about limiting mistakes, and players are out there playing to try not to make mistakes, right? Like they could drive it, but they just want to pass it. Or they have an open shot, but they just want to pass it because they have a fear of missing. So it's kind of a common thing. I dealt with it as a player myself. But the question is, like, if a player doesn't have confidence, can they ever truly reach their full potential?
I think no, to be honest. I think unless they get that confidence in themselves, if you are constantly playing unconfident, what I've seen is you kind of get what I call like the self-fulfilling prophecy is you're worried about making a mistake, so then you make a mistake, and then by making the mistake, you worry about making more mistakes, and then it's just like this spin cycle, right? That you're just spinning out. So I think if you're in that space and you're struggling like that, it's really hard to ever fully reach your potential, and I think you have to find a way to get out of that. And again, as coaches, we do have some ability to help with that.
Yeah, so give me some examples of like when something happens in a game, examples in a game where you're like, oh no, this player is struggling with confidence. How does that show up in games?
One of the most common ones we see is like your head drops, right? You see like shots missed and, head drops down, or there's a verbal thing, like, whether it's sometimes you can just hear a player cussing out loud, like, yeah, dang it, I'm not going to say it on air, but, they're kind of doing that. Or they're just like, when their head drops, they look sad, like they look like depressed and sad, or they're like bummed. The other couple other ways, one that I've seen before is they're looking at the bench all the time. Like something happens and they're like looking over at the coach and like worried, am I going to get subbed? Like, am I going to get, do they jog back? Like, as we've talked about that before, as far as like not being lazy, but it can also be a confidence thing. Like they miss a shot and they're so caught up in what just happened that they're jogging back on defense and not thinking about the next play. And I think that's a lack of confidence as well. So those are some of the ways that I think of that I've seen for sure on the court that are pretty common, I would say.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of a player specifically. I'm obviously not going to say any names or anything, but I think this player lacks a little bit of confidence. And for me, I see it when this player dribbles, which is maybe weird and maybe not common, but like he'll put it on the ground and in the open court or whatever, but it's just the head is like, I need to get rid of this, and like that's a lack of confidence in your ball handling. And also you'll see like people passing up shots. Like even though like a good shooter's wide open and they don't shoot it, I think there's a lack of confidence there where I'll see it. But yeah, I mean, the head dropping and all that kind of stuff is definitely body language and low confidence. Now, coaches, like we're talking about building confidence, but first let's talk about hurting confidence. Can coaches hurt a player's confidence? And if so, how?
Yeah, 100%. I would say a player can be their own worst enemy, but a coach can also be their own worst enemy at the same time. I think if you're too hard on a player in any situation, right? And I know there's a fine line, because I obviously know there are probably some people listening to this like, man, we're already so soft as coaches, we don't need to be softer than we are, right? And I don't mean too hard as in holding them accountable. I think it's okay to hold them accountable, but how you do that and how you approach that is a different thing. Like if a kid misses a shot, I mean, I remember back in the day, it probably still happens, but I remember when I was in high school and sometimes we'd be in practice and we'd miss a couple layups, or even in college, miss a couple layups, and all of a sudden coach, that's it, everybody get online, you guys can't, blah, 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 blah. All of a sudden the bleeps start coming out and you can't make a layup, you can't do this, you're sorry. And it's like, all right, like, yeah, we're missing, don't get me wrong, like that's on us, we got to be better, but that's not really building our confidence, right? Or you're missing shots, and then coaches say things like, man, you ever gonna make a shot? Like, I've heard just stuff like that before. And I think just anytime you're being overly negative, like, yes, when a player makes a mistake, unless they are just completely unaware of what's going on, like, they know they made a mistake. You know what I mean? And it's okay to get fiery sometimes and to be like, hey, what are you doing? What are we thinking here? But I think there's a way to go about it. And when you are overly negative and you're like demeaning the player, maybe that's like the word I'm looking for. You're kind of demeaning them. You're doing things that are closer to that side. Then, okay, hey, what are you doing? Why did you do that? And then, hey, we don't do that, so don't do it again. Like, I think there's two different ways. You can still hold them accountable, but you don't have to be demeaning. And that's where I've seen coaches rip a player's confidence, or even just like putting limits. And we've talked about this before. Like, okay, you're maybe not the best 3-point shooter, and so your coach says, don't ever shoot a 3-pointer. And it's like, okay, I understand maybe analytically where you're coming from, but at the same time, if you tell, especially a high school kid, like, you can never shoot threes, even though they have the range, and I think we have to delineate, if it's a post player who can't shoot a 3-pointer ever, like, that's different, right? Like, they literally don't have the range. But if you got a guard who can maybe knock down some threes, but really they're not great, they're more of a driver, if you tell them never to shoot, guess what? They'll never learn to shoot, and they'll never be confident in that. And so to me, I think those are some ways that coaches take away players' confidence.
Yeah, and that's made some good points about like shot selection. Like, I think that's why it's so important to like communicate and define to your players what you're willing to take and what you think are good shots. Because if you do that, then when those shots occur, they know that they can take them, and they feel comfortable taking them. Like, we tell our players that the first thing we want is a wide open layup at the rim. Like, if anybody can get a wide open layup at the rim, we're taking it. Next thing we want to do is we want to get to the basket and use shot fakes and draw fouls. Like, we want to get to the free throw line. After that, we want wide open threes by our best shooters. And then after that, we want wide open wide open shots by people in their range from anybody. And so, it's just kind of a pecking order of what we're looking for, but there is that one where it's wide open jumper by anybody. And then you just kind of, every now and then, you got to kind of live with somebody taking a shot where you got to cringe a little bit. But I think as coaches, you just analyze what you just got. What did you just get? Well, we got a wide open shot. Okay, well, we can live with that. Like, let's just, clap it up and build it up, instead of like, what are you doing? Like, those kind of things can destroy a player's confidence. And I've seen really good players who are super confident lose their confidence, right? They lose it, right? Like a shooting slump. And I can think of players I've coached that were like our best players, and then they seem to have lost their confidence at some point in the season. So what is the difference? Or actually, not what's the difference, but why do you think that happens to even players that are good, are confident, but then all of a sudden in the games, they're not?
I think if we're just talking about between like practice and games, why is there maybe a difference there? I think once you get into the game, there's that pressure that is on. Some people, like they say, some people perform when the lights go on, and some people, when the lights go on, they kind of cower from it, right? So I think when you get into the game and you realize, look, if I make the same mistake that I made in practice, like, now we could lose, or I could be out of the game, or whatever, you can see that confidence tend to shift. And so I think that's sometimes hard for players to apply in practice to games, because in practice, if you make a mistake, like, realistically, yeah, okay, coach might be a little upset, but you just replay the thing most of the time, and then you can fix it, right? So I think that if we're just talking that side, that's one thing. Now, I know you also asked, like, what about players that have confidence? Were you talking about players that have confidence in games even, and then at some point they go through a slump and they lose that confidence? Okay? I think that confidence is something that, like, the mental part of the game is so, I don't want to say fleeting, but almost like it's hard to grasp and hold on to forever. Like, if you've repped out like hundreds of thousands of free throws, like, how to shoot a free throw, and you're not going to just ever forget how to do that. And it's just kind of ingrained in you. And confidence, I think, can be ingrained in you to an extent, but I think for a lot of people, it's just not that solid. Like, they don't truly believe that they are ready for the next thing. Like, there's just so many variables. Like, they're playing for their coach. Do they really know what the coach thinks? No. Like, they're in their head, they made a mistake, and they're like, oh my God, coach thinks I'm terrible. Coach thinks I suck. Coach is going to sub me out. My players are mad at me. I'm not doing this enough. And so they get in their own head, and then the confidence can drop, even if you were playing really well for a long period of time. And the thing is, we see it at the highest level. Like, we see it at the NBA level. You see guys that are killing, and then all of a sudden something happens, changes team, they get an injury, something like that. They're the same player, but it's just a little bit different, and all of a sudden everything changes. That's why it's so amazing to watch those guys that are like 10, 15, 20-year superstar all-stars, and it's like, man, they have a level of confidence that's just like unshakable. And I think that's kind of rare. So, why does it happen? I think because most human beings, honestly, no matter who you are, 99% of people really struggle to maintain high levels of confidence all the time. I think that's hard to do.
I agree. And I think for the high school players, it's like they're moving up levels, right? So they're seventh grade, they're playing against seventh grade competition. So they might, even if they have a great year, and then they go up to eighth grade and can I do it again? And then it's freshman, then it's JV, then it's varsity. And it's like every time they don't know if they're going to be able to average the 14, 15 points a game. And so until they do it, then they don't really have that unbreakable confidence. I think they can get confident, right? They can be like, okay, I'm the best player on this team. I'm going to take shots. But I know for me personally, like in college, I, was a bench guy. And then finally my junior year, I came off the bench and I scored 15 points, which I had never scored more than probably 4 points in a game. And like, for me, that was like the game changer for me. I was like, that was my new benchmark that I was trying to like get to every game. And so I think it's the 4-minute mile, right? Like nobody could run a 4-minute mile for years until one person did it. And then like the next week, 100 people did it because they understood they could do it. And so, yeah, I think for the unbreakable confidence, I think you have to make it happen, reach your goals, and then go back to that same level and reach your goal. And then now you have the confidence, you redo it again. And then the third year at that same level, then you already know you've done it a million times, you can do it again. I hope that makes sense. But I'm just thinking about guys who've played varsity multiple years, and like, if they have a good year on varsity and they're coming back the next year, they're probably going to have another good year.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think once you've done it a lot, you're more comfortable with it and you're more confident in it, right? And so if you're like a bench player your sophomore year and then a junior year you're a starter, by the time you're a senior, you're like, okay, I've spent 3 years up here. I've started for a whole year. Like, this is now my routine. I've got that feeling, that confidence in me, And I would share a similar story for myself as what you did. Like, end of high school, same thing. I had a lot of issues. I had a lot of injury issues. I had lack of confidence. I didn't start in high school. I mean, we've had this conversation. I got to college and I was a bench player for the first 3 years. And every year I played a little more. By the time I was a junior, I was playing more off the bench, but I was still coming off the bench with that goal of starting. And it finally took my senior year, and it was kind of the same thing. Like, I had a couple games where I was finally putting the ball in the hole and things were just flowing. And all of a sudden it was like a shift. I didn't magically get better overnight. It wasn't like the night before I was worse and then I got a bunch of new skills the next day, but just I saw the ball go through the hole. I felt the confidence from my team, from my coach, and everything changed, and my level of play went up, just kind of like what you described for yourself as well.
Nice. Yeah. And I think we've all seen, right, the basketball players that, let's be honest, basketball players are cocky. Hypothetically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not hypothetically, but just stereotypically.
In general. Yeah, in general.
And so we've all seen the basketball player who's got kind of like, I guess you call the fake confidence. And then we've seen basketball players who have like real confidence. Like, what's the difference?
I think the ones that have the real confidence are the ones that are usually, I would say a lot of times, like maybe a little more on the quieter side. Like, if I was just kind of talking generalities, right? Like, they're a little more quiet, not saying they don't talk at all, but more like humble, right? Like, more, I think they have a better grasp of like what's going on. I think ones that have real confidence, they have a grasp of like, okay, here's where I'm at, here's where everyone else is at, and then also a grasp of the bigger picture. Like, okay, I'm the best player in my school, or I'm the best player in my county, but like, there's a whole state out there, and I got to keep working. And like, I'm still confident in who I am, but I'm still humble and I'm hungry. And I think a lot of the fake confidence comes from the ones that like, they're not really as good. And so they are really loud. They like pretend and they talk themselves up, and they have to put on like a show because they know at heart they're not really as good as they think they are. And so they have that kind of fake confidence, the fake toughness, the fake, all that. You can just tell, and it's hard to pinpoint, but it's like, once you've been around basketball enough, like, you can look at a guy, I feel like, in like 5 minutes and watch him play and be like, oh, that guy's got like fake confidence, or real confidence. I mean, I've sat in the stands with some of my friends that coach before, and we've watched a game, and like within the first 5 dribbles, watch someone dribble, I'm like, that guy can play, or no, he can't. Like, you could just tell by the way they move. There's like something about it, and it's hard to pinpoint. But yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing, is like the real confident players, like, they just carry themselves in a way that's like a little more humble. I don't know if that's the right word I'm looking for, but that's how I feel.
I think that is the right word, because if you truly are confident in yourself and you have the high self-esteem, a lot of it could be changed to self-esteem, then you don't have to do all that fake stuff. You don't have to do all that yapping and stuff. Like, you actually truly do believe in yourself. So you don't have to build yourself up in front of other people. You already are built up in your own mind. So someone could say something or do something and it wouldn't shake you. And I think the true confidence comes from like the understanding of your role on the team. Like, if you understand that you're the best player on the team and you're the primary scorer, and if you don't shoot the ball one time during the game, your team is going to lose, and you understand that, and you're a leader and it's your responsibility, like what more do you want? If you don't shoot it, if you don't play with confidence, then you're letting your team down. So I think at that point, when you're in that position, it's easy to have real confidence. I think when you're more of like kind of middle of the pack type player, or just maybe you're on a team that everyone's kind of even, a really good team where everyone's really good, it's harder to build confidence. I know, like, maybe this isn't confidence, but I know, like, when I'm playing on a really good team with a lot of good players, like, I'll kind of fade to the background a lot of times, and I think we all do this as players. But when I'm on a team and I know that, and when I shoot a shot, I'll feel like, I should have passed that one sometimes, or I'll pass up an open one because I know I got that great shooter right next to me and stuff. And when it's the other way around, when everyone's looking to me to be the primary guy, like, my confidence level, I guess, is just a little bit higher. Maybe that's not confidence, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's more of a self-awareness. I mean, which I would say in a way is confidence. Is like, if you're on the court and you have other players around that are also good, you're more willing to share it and give it up a little more. Where if you know that you are the only scoring option, like, you also can turn that on and be like, okay, now I can go get some buckets. I would say that's all confidence, because you have to be able to know where you're at and who you're playing with, where the fake confidence would be, well, I'm on the court and there's 3 or 4 other guys that are better than me, so I got to prove that I'm better than them by taking every shot, and that's fake confidence. Like, you don't truly believe in that, who you are.
Yeah, I think as coaches, probably the biggest thing that we do to hurt players' confidence could be like with our subbing. So let's talk a little bit about that, because, man, it's so hard. Like, a player makes a mistake, it's so hard to not sub them out sometimes, like, especially when you have like your 2 or 3 starters on the bench and you got some bench guys in there, and maybe somebody makes a defensive mistake and they come down and throw a turnover. Subbing them out real quick, that could hurt their confidence. So how do you, I guess, manage those kind of situations?
I kind of have like an unwritten rule in the way that I sub, where first mistakes are, I mean, unless it's just like an unbelievably egregious mistake, which honestly off the top of my head I can't even think of what something like that would be, but
like a step back
first
fadeaway 3.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, unless it's just something really crazy. Like, I'm generally a let them play through the first mistake. Like, okay, you come in, you got subbed in, you just turn the ball over. Like, I'm just gonna be like, all right, come on, next play, you got it. Like, let's keep moving. And my goal and hope is then as they get up and down a couple more times, they'll start to get a little more confident in the flow, and then everything will smooth out. Now, I know that's hard in certain situations, right? Because you're like, well, I'm just trying to get them in to get my starter 2 minutes of rest or 3 minutes of rest, and we can't even afford 1 turnover right now, and that just kills you. But I think generally as a rule, like, I try to stick to that as best as I can, and most of the time I do a pretty good job of being able to stick to that and saying, okay, make your 1 mistake if it happens. Ideally you don't, but if you do, play through it. And then after there, it's kind of a judgment. Like, if it's 2, and again, they're doing some other good things, then, like, we've talked something a little bit before, if you're making some mistakes but you're doing so many good things on the other side, we can probably balance it out and live with it. It's hard when it's like mistake and you're doing nothing. Like, you're not defending, you're not rebounding, like, you're not scoring, and you're just turning the ball over. It's like, man, I can't wait that long, So I think there's a certain point where, as a coach, like, you have to do what's best for the team, and the player has to be willing to understand that. And, like, if they come in and don't perform, that's, the majority of that is on them. Some of it is on us to give them confidence and then put them in the right positions for 100%. But at the end of the day, like, as a player, if you're not performing, and we're not talking about, again, you didn't give me 10 points in 5 minutes. No, we're talking like, are you taking care of the ball and are you playing defense? If you're not even doing that, like, sorry, today's not your day, man. Like, you gotta sit for a bit. And I think that's just kind of how sports are. It's never going to be perfect where we can sit there and curate this perfect world for every kid to come in. And that's why athletics can be difficult, right? And also why it's character building, because really good, confident players will come out of that environment and be like, okay, I messed up today, but I'm going to learn from it and build on it next time,
Yeah, and a lot of it too is like, how are they reacting to their mistakes? Because these are high school kids, and, man, you can see the tears starting to well up in their eyes after they, miss 2 free throws in a row and then commit a foul right away, and then they look over at you and you're just like, what? And then you can see they're like, oh, and they can kind of shrivel up, and then that's where you got to sub them out, I think. Like, to me, body language is huge. Like, if I look over and you're crying on the bench, you're not going back in. Like, and if I see you in the game just, not being confident in that way, then you're probably coming out. But it's hard. It's a fine line to walk. And to be honest, like, I would prefer just to tell my players, like, look, if I sub you out because you made a mistake, just take it and just be okay with it, and don't let it affect you, and just know that it's just part of the game. Because I just don't see how you I mean, yeah, I understand that's a good rule. One mistake, you're okay with it. Two mistakes, they might get subbed out. But in a close game, in a championship game, when you come off the bench and you come in the game and you're cold, like, might not even be your fault. You might just be cold off the bench. All of a sudden, you got the best defender on their whole team guarding you, and you're a freshman playing varsity or something, and it could be tough. So yeah, I would just say that for me, I just want my players to be able to take that and be okay with it and not let it hurt their confidence, but I understand that it could. Okay, let's keep going. So other ways that coaches can hurt players' confidence. Film. Let's talk a little bit about film. Everyone's scared when you have film and you're coming in to watch film, and coach is like, all right, here we go, and it's just all quiet. And the people that aren't in the game are just like, I'm chilling. I barely played last game. And the people that did play are like, so how do we avoid, hurting their confidence during film?
I think one, you have to front load them and be upfront about, like, hey, like, I usually at the beginning of the year when we start going into film, obviously the older players, they've been through it, right? They know the drill. They're more used to it. But the new kids, especially kids coming up from JV, they've never had film before. And so we sit down. So I always get in front of the whole group and I say, look, we're watching film to get better, right? Like, the mistakes that were made, we cannot fix them. As far as, like, we can't go in the past and change them, I should say. But we can fix them in the future. And so I'm going to call your name out and point to what you're doing sometimes. Like, don't take it personally. It's not that I don't like you. If I really didn't want you on the court, then you would never be on the court, or you wouldn't be on the team. Like, you're here for a reason, and we're trying to help you get better. And just that, I feel like it's not perfect. I'm sure they still feel a little bit of, like, angst or anxiety about getting called out, but I do think it takes, like, a level of just, like, okay, like, I get it. Like, yeah, I'm gonna mess up, and we just got to accept that. I remember being a player, and sometimes we'd walk into film and be the first time, and there was, like, nothing. It was just like, sit down, shut up, and watch the film, and then they're calling you out, and it's like, damn, like, this is, dude doesn't even like me. Like, what's going on here? And there was, like, no front loading with the team with, like, okay, yeah, like, you guys made some mistakes, but we're learning from this. Don't take it personal. It's nothing like that. I think just having that little basic conversation can help with taking away some of that anxiety and fear. It's not going to completely get rid of it, but I don't know. To me, that seemed to has helped with my players. As far as I can tell, right?
Yeah, and I think also showing clips of, like, good things can help too. Like, just mix in a couple good things that they can learn from that as well. So that's, I think, important too. But yeah, film is what it is, man. It's coaching. So if you don't want to be coached, don't play sports, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to coach you and make you better. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about practice and stuff. Like, what can we do in practice, drill-wise or communication-wise or anything else-wise, to help our players build confidence?
Drill-wise, I think you want to use drills as best as you can that fit into your offense or your defensive schemes. If you do drills that, make sense with what they're going to do when they're 5-on-5, if you, do little small-sided things, then I think it builds confidence, because then they understand the pieces to the puzzle. So I think that's important. I think providing clarity, we were talking earlier about, like, a kid that maybe isn't a great shooter, and then, how do you kind of approach them? I think providing clarity and being honest with kids is okay. And I sometimes think where coaches can be afraid to be honest, but because they're like, well, I don't want to be, like you said, over the top. But if I take a kid who, I don't know, I've had players that maybe aren't a great ball handler, but they can catch and rip and get to the basket. And I'll have an honest conversation with them and be like, okay, what are your strengths? And just let them talk about it. Well, I'm good at driving to the hole. I'm not a great shooter. I'm not, like, super shifty, if you want to use that as a word, whatever. I'm not going to hit a million dribble moves, but if I catch and rip and go, like, I'm decent to get into the basket. Okay, so let's put you in those situations and keep getting you in those, and I want you attacking the basket because you're good at that. And then on the side, in practice and in the off season, let's work on your ball handling and your shooting so that you can get more well-rounded. And then it's clarity. Like, and they know that their strength is driving off of a catch and rip and go. And you don't have to sit there and be like, well, your ball handling sucks and you can't shoot. And it's like, well, that's obviously not going to create confidence in the kid. But if they have a honest conversation and they talk it out themselves, like kids are fairly self-aware, like I think more self-aware than we sometimes give them credit for. And they'll realize a lot of times, like, here's what I'm good, here's what I'm not. And then you can be on the same page. And I think when you and the kid are on the same page, they feel that confidence from you and like vice versa. And it gives them that ability to then do whatever it is they do best. They'll do it at the best level they can.
Nice. I think that was a great answer, and totally agree with putting them in the situations that they're going to see in the games that allows them to succeed in practice, build confidence. That was a great answer. I think the other thing that we can do in practice and just in general is our culture, right? Like how are players, like what's the environment like? How are they lifting each other up? When you're coaching a kid up and he's looking down, how are other players lifting him up? It's so funny how, you could be doing a scrimmage or a drill or whatever, and you blow the whistle and you stop it, and you're about to just make a correction so that everybody can see it. Like, hey, you want to force them this way in this situation. Whoever you're directing it to, you might not even say their name or whatever, but everyone kind of knows, oh, that is a person who kind of just made a mistake. Like, it affects them. Like, they feel like, oh, man, like, as soon as you blow the whistle, all right, everybody freeze. They're just like, oh, man, it's like, dude, you do not need to feel like that at all. Not even 1%. Like, yeah, you made the mistake, but I just want everybody to know that this is like a learning opportunity. And I just wish that, I don't know, I guess that goes with the communication part too, right? Like, I think we need to communicate those things to players. Like, hey, it's nothing personal. When we call you guys out for stuff in practice, like, just learn from it and try to apply it, So what else in practice and culture-wise in your program can you do to help players build confidence?
I think specifically maybe with your captains, really keying with them, and talking to them and being like, look, you're explaining their role, like as a captain is to help build confidence. Like a lot of times we talk about captains' roles to hold players accountable and sometimes to tell them, hey, that's not the right thing to do, right? Which is also important and valuable. But I think from a confidence standpoint, it's also important for them to be like, oh, like you said, like they need to be the ones leading the talking. They need to be the ones picking people up, setting the tone, just having that better camaraderie on the team. And you have to have somebody doing that, like you talked about in a general sense, picking each other up. But I think you have to have a couple leaders that are willing to be like, hey, you're all right. Like, okay, coach just said this, and this. We're at a water break. Pull them aside, put your arm around. They can put their arm around and be like, hey, like, I know coach is just getting on you. He's just trying to make you better. You're doing fine. Like, he wouldn't be correcting you if he didn't want you to be here. Like, that type of stuff. I think that's a big thing because we know hearing it from us and hearing it from another player, it's just two different avenues. And when you hear it from another player, I feel like it means so much more. It sticks so much better than when you're only hearing it from a coach.
Yeah. So you basically said it's important to have those players, whether they're captains or certain players that pick each other up specifically. What about the opposite? Like players that destroy their teammates' confidence. These are the ones that are yappers, that are trying to build themselves up by tearing other people down. And I see this happen sometimes. Players that are don't have super high self-esteem, or they're doubting themselves, try to tear other players down to make themselves look better so they can kind of leapfrog in that player rotation or whatever it is, starting spot. Like, what do you do with those kind of players? And have you ever had to deal with one of those?
I can't say since I've been a head coach on the girls' side that I've had to deal with that. Obviously, we've talked before. I think there's maybe a little difference between how the boys and the girls interact with each other. I'm not saying that never happens, but I have not personally dealt with that as a head coach. I've seen it as an assistant. How we deal with that. Sometimes you try and have conversations with those people and be like, hey, like that's not how we do things here. Like you're negatively affecting the team. You're negatively affecting your teammates. There, I think it's really important to have strong captains that are willing to come in and lay the hammer down and say, we don't do that. Unfortunately, I've seen those types of players be the ones who halfway through the season, they're gone, because they're cancerous. Like you don't want to have a cancerous player on your team, and you don't want someone stealing energy from the rest of your team and stealing confidence from your other players. So I would highly caution coaches against those with those types of players. And you try to teach them and work with them, but the reality is some people just are not willing to learn and listen and to be a team person. And I would say try and not work with those people as much as you can. Doesn't matter how talented they are, like they're going to negatively impact your team and the players on the team in the long run.
Yep. And I think as a coach, you're going to run into a lot of players that just think they're better than they are, and think they deserve more playing time or more whatever responsibility than they should. And you're going to run into that like almost every year. It seems like a lot of times they're not cancerous. Okay. They just kind of are in the background, and maybe they have one little buddy that they kind of vent to, or maybe they vent to your assistant coach or something. But sometimes they are outspoken and they call you out, and they believe this and that, and they try to tear other people down. They create cliques, right? It's really cliquey. If your team becomes really cliquey, it's not good. I mean, there's always going to be, your seniors and then your juniors are kind of more together. But as a coach, I think it's our job to try to kind of mold everyone together and become one. So, but that's always part of the challenge. Okay, so let's kind of finish this off with a really kind of maybe profound question. Like, you have a big game, you guys do tons to prepare for it, and then one of your best players who you love, who's been great for you all year, has like the worst game of their life. What do you tell them after the game in the locker room?
I think you have to just kind of say, look, this is part of athletics. Is you never know what you're gonna get on any given night. Like, you could do all the preparation, all the stuff that you want, and something could come out and take it right out from underneath you. And I think you just have to kind of convey that doesn't make them individually nor the team a failure in that case. Like, sometimes stuff happens. If they were doing all the other things right, they were trying to do everything else right, and they just couldn't make a shot, sometimes that's life, and just like in real life, you can't always predict what's going to happen, and you're going to have stuff like that happen every so often in your life, on the court and off the court. And I can kind of give a small like anecdote on that. Right out of COVID, we had just gotten the number 2 seed in the CIF playoffs in Division 2, I think at the time, and my basically best player, my like most well-rounded glue player, 24 hours before the game got COVID and was not allowed to play in the playoff game. And first team all county, first team all league, all this stuff. And we played the 15 seed at home. We ended up losing by 4. It's a game where like everybody knows we have her, we win that game. And it was devastating. It's devastating for her. She doesn't even get to play in her last game, where she's FaceTiming us from home, like in tears. Like, it was hard, and that's the reality, is that's sometimes life. She didn't do anything wrong, and it's hard to see that. But at the end of the day, that's kind of a perfect embodiment of what you're talking about, is sometimes the ball just doesn't roll your way. Something happens. And I know that was technically off the court, and you're talking more about having a bad game, but that's just sometimes how it is. Everything goes wrong, and you've got to be able to bounce back and learn from it. Whether it's a life lesson or a basketball lesson, like, you've got to be able to learn from it, because I think that builds resiliency, and resilient people are successful in the long run.
I totally agree. And I think the only thing I would add on top would be, you can let them know, hey, tomorrow's a new day, another opportunity to get back into the gym and use this as motivation, right? Like, that's where confidence is truly, truly built, right? It's in the practice you build it. And then once you use it in the game and you see it and you succeed, boom, now you got proof to yourself that you are who you say you are, or who you believe you are. And then there's true confidence. So it's just like back to the drawing board, I think, anytime something bad happens. But all the stuff you said, I think was really good too. So any final thoughts, Coach, before we go ahead and land the plane?
Yeah, two things. One, what you were just talking about, I think one of the beautiful things about basketball is that anytime something goes wrong, you can just get back in the gym the next day. And like, that is, most things in life aren't like that. Like, something goes wrong, it's like, nah, I might not have an opportunity for this for 6 months. Like, you can just hop right on the court the next day in basketball and work on whatever it is that was wrong. So I think that's really cool and special, and that if you're a player or a coach, you should appreciate that, because not everything is like that. The second thing is, I think that as much as we want to teach confidence to kids, and we have some play in that, some of it is on them as well. I think it's a balance. But I think the biggest thing for kids is, they are always going to wonder, like, when coach does something, they have a million different scenarios that go through their mind of why you're doing it. And we know, like, I know when I pull a kid out, even if I'm really pissed and I pull a kid out and I bench them for a little bit, by the time they've put their butt on the bench, like, I'm moving on, like, I don't sit there and dwell on it. But the kids, I think, a lot of times think that we dwell on stuff and we're just like so angry at them. And so that's kind of I think the biggest problem is, how do we convey to them that, hey, we're moving on. Like, we might be fiery for a couple seconds, but then we're moving on, and like, nothing changed in our relationship, nothing changed in my trust, nothing changed and if you can find a way to be, again, reach clarity with that, I think you're more likely to have kids bounce back quicker when they do have something go wrong in a game. So that would just be my last thoughts. Again, it's not as easy as it sounds, but that would be, I think, the way to maybe approach that and fix that problem.
Yeah, no, I think that was a good one there as well. My final thought is going to be that it's really hard, I think, as a coach to build confidence. It's hard, but it's easy to break it. So you got to kind of be careful. And just with everything, it's kind of how you say it, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And so that's the last thing I think as a coach you want to do is break someone's confidence. So just be careful, be straightforward, and sidebar conversations are always better than screaming at the top of your lungs during practice or a game. So, all right. Thank you guys so much. Wow, if you're still watching this right now, you stuck around all the way to the end. That means you must like this content. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Go ahead and share this with another coach that you think might appreciate it. And with that said, we'll catch you guys in the next episode.